Welcome, everybody. My name's Kevin Bradley. I'm a professor and state extension weed scientist at the University of Missouri. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what we've found over the years with electrocution as a weed control tactic. Primary unit we've worked with so far is called the weed zapper. I just wanted to make everybody aware there are other units. I'll show some of those in a second, other than this particular brand, but this is the one we've worked with the most. We are likely going to work with another company next year. And so with anything, there's probably going to be differences between brands and company products. And so these are all the kind of specifications for this particular unit. This is a small one illustrated on the screen. Obviously, we are doing kind of smaller type of research. They do have larger sizes and different connection devices up front and everything like that. But this particular one was best suited to our small plot needs. And so you can see all the kind of comments or bullet points that are on the specifics kind of thing. 15,000 volts translocating through plants and 110,000 watt generator on the back of the tractor. And so electricity is funneled up underneath of the tractor and attached to the copper boom up front. So a lot of these are very similar. I'll just show you some of them in action here, or I'll show you the weed zapper in action, to some different views from right up front at the boom to just a kind of a side shot there going through some ragweed. And so depending on the moisture conditions, you will get a spark every now and then, but not always. The more wet and moisture the plants have, seems like the less of that you get. But like I said, there is other units. Lasco is another company that I think we might be working with next year, Lasco Lightning Weeder. And then to make this as confusing as possible, Zasso, which is sounds very similar, obviously. They have a different unit altogether. And so, this is probably going to continue as research shows that electrocution has a potential fit. So let's get into this a little bit. Why would we look at this in the first place? In agriculture, part of my whole research focus is bringing things from specialty crops or organic world and investigating it into kind of conventional large scale agriculture, corn and soybean. And certainly in large scale corn and soybean right now today in the US, we are very herbicide centric. That's no big surprise. Most of our growers, retailers, companies, consultants, everybody involved are, when you say weed control, you're thinking of herbicides. That may not necessarily be the case in the future. Most in the industry that we are in expect herbicides and traits to solve this problem of resistant weeds. Resistant weeds are certainly why we would be investigating this in the first place. And we just see resistance over and over and over, particularly in our pigweed species. And in the Midwest and in much of the rest of the US, that means water hemp. And, we just keep on seeing this treadmill of we have a herbicide, we get resistance to it, we move on to the next herbicide. And I don't know how sustainable that's going to be in the future. And that's why we're looking at things like this. Secondarily, let's just forget all of that for a second and let's just think about what if there were a service provided by a retailer or whoever for a field like this. Quite frankly, in July, when something has gone wrong and we've had escapes, maybe it's resistance, maybe it's not, maybe we didn't get the timely herbicide made, doesn't really matter. But right now, we don't have really any option for this kind of situation. And what if there was a fee for service kind of model where we did have that we could reduce that seed bank right there and kill those water hemp plants. And so that's just a whole nother idea of how this might be workable in the future. So a lot of our research with electrocution is just testing proof of concept. Can it work? Can it be something that is done in the future? And I'll just jump to the answer to that. Yes, it can work, particularly on our pigweed species, but there are some things to think about. Um, so I'm just going to go through like five or six thoughts of what we've learned, and there's data to go behind some of this, but I don't want this to be some kind of data dump and a bunch of tables and figures, and we have some of that, but a lot of these are just statements, and so the first thing I just want to be clear is obviously, with these current units, what would you say is the number one disadvantage? I mean, I'd have to say that this is not. Uh, all that uh, safe. It can be dangerous if you're not doing everything right and paying attention. There's numerous fail safes and safeguards on these machines where, it will cut off as soon as you get out of the seat, that kind of things, or as soon as you raise the boom out of the ground. Yeah, so it has numerous safety issues, but we want to make sure we're safe and it's keep people away from it and all of that. And I'll add to that, this is not something really for drier environments, probably. We learned a hard lesson of going into a field like this, not the best looking picture, but this was early spring when winter annual weeds had been burned down, and all we had left was mare's tail that was resistant, and you can see all the brown down there. That was a bad idea. That was actually literally our first time doing anything with electrocution, and we didn't think through this. But all that brown dead material down there created a spark and caused a little fire there that we quickly put out. Uh, I would just say that as long as you know this and are not as dumb as I am, and it was never a problem since then, and you want to stay out of any kind of droughty conditions or anything like that. But in a soybean field in June or July in Missouri, this is certainly not an issue. There's tons of green moist material there, and we never had any kind of problems like that after that. But as you move into Western geographies where things are drier, uh, definitely probably think about whether this is a fit or not. So that's kind of the bad. Everything's got a good and bad, right? So that's bad, but everything else is just what we've learned. And with these current implements, or with the one we have evaluated, with the single bar and all of that, really it's kind of opposite of herbicides in a lot of ways. The bigger the weed, the better. The good thing about it is there's no more quicker response uh, to weed control than electrocution. The seconds after you do it, you not only smell it and hear it when it's happening, and sometimes see it, but seconds later you start to see wilting, and within an hour or so you start to see death and necrosis and things like that. So these are really pretty tall mare's tail plants, horseweed plants at the time of application. You can see kind of response 7 days previously, and actually that picture probably would look the same 2 days after, or maybe even a day after. And so it is quick, it's immediate, and from what we've seen, uh, tall plants are better for getting that electrocution, that current maybe to through the plant. It depends on the physiology of the plant. Here's a pure stand of giant ragweed, and the green there is really probably, if I had to guess, plants that never got contacted. So just like coverage of herbicides would be an issue in any application into a scenario like that. These are plants that probably didn't get contacted with the boom, which is why I'm saying that, more growth is often better. So it's not necessarily that we can't kill small weeds, because we can, but anything that could germinate after or that was under the boom is probably going to survive. So really, this little video, in my mind, illustrates currently for these units that are a single bar above the row. This is probably the best scenario for where we would use these. You can see in this particular case, this is, I believe, giant ragweeds sticking up above some soybean fairly late in the season. And this is kind of where we are with these devices. There are some manufacturers that are starting to have between row, and I'm very interested in that idea and looking at that a little more because that's where I think we need to go next is looking at these between the row. And again, all of this is proof of concept and in the fact that someday, who knows, maybe we have autonomous robotic units that are going between the row that eliminate weeds with electrocution. It's certainly things that we are thinking about and looking through. So in that same realm of bigger weeds are better and the current models are probably better for weed escapes. One other thing that you can get out of this is, like I mentioned before, some level of reduction in the weed seed viability. Of course, if you electrocute the weed way before it forms seed, then that's a that's a win 100%. But if you are going through a field that has seed on it already, we found that as you can see here, water hemp seed viability can get reduced by 67%. Few things are 100%. Nothing's a silver bullet, but that would be way better than having all that water hemp seed being viable going back onto the field. And I will say a lot of that, there's probably more work that needs to be done here about uh, the time of electrocution in relation to what stage the seed was at in the first place and all of that. So that could be resolved a whole lot more. Another thing I'll say is, believe it or not all weeds are controlled equally by electrocution. I'll show you the kind of the good and then some of the less good or not so good. So this was several years of data where we were evaluating different species in a pure stand, no crop present. So that's very important to, this was the first things we ever did with electrocution. So um, we were able to pretty much maximize all the factors as far as getting the best contact with the weeds that we wanted and all of that. And as you can see here, our results are very good, and I stand by these results. These are pure stands of weeds, like I said, and numerous years all into this data that you see before you. But you're going to see that things change when we are just electrocuting above the crop canopy. So I'll show that next. But the take-home message here is that the grasses, no matter how you're doing it, the grasses are a little less controlled by electrocution. We think that's just due to the architecture and physiology of the grass itself. Much smaller stems, harder to get contact with. I don't know. There's many possible scenarios or hypotheses, and we need to look more at that. But for the most part, this is really good on giant ragweed, mare's tail, and water hemp and the ragweeds as a whole. So the next set of data I'll show you is a multi-state study, and things change quite a bit here. So this we did after those initial experiments I just showed you. And this was across numerous states, obviously, Indiana, Iowa, Illinois, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska. And we had a variety of different species. In this particular case, this was in soybean and always controlling escapes. And you can see here that our results change quite a bit as far as efficacy. So not as good as we'd like to see. And you can start to see the variability. And so that's part of our next steps is try to figure out why the variability. And I think we're starting to, but we're not there yet. And so you can see here, um, vast differences in the level of control of different species. And that's my next point. Again, there's the variability, and my next point is just we're actively trying to figure out why, and have some ideas and some data already. But this is looking at the pigweed data alone from that multi-state study, and this is our first glimpse into uh, what is going on here? Like, how can you have such poor control in Illinois in 2021 and such greater control in 2022? What was happening there? So that's part of science. That's part of trying to figure out where's what are the reasons and how can we reduce this variability and control? And uh, and so we have some possible things that we'd like to put forward. And one of them is this. We believe boom height has a boom placement on the weed has a uh, tremendous effect on the level of weed control you get. And so this study was all the water hemp were really tall, 38 to 40 inches. And so we changed the level of our electrocution boom height on that water hemp. So we had some plots where our boom was at 12 inches, black bar is 12 inches, the gold bar is 24 inches, and the gray bar is 36-inch height. So when we're just barely skimming the top of that water hemp plant with the electrocution bar, as sometimes happens when you're doing weed escapes later in the season, we're likely not going to get as good a weed control with electrocution that we could if we were able to get that bar down lower. That's kind of the take-home message of this slide and what we found, and where those between row units might be a little more effective, and that's something we want to look at in 2026. Another thing that we found is the moisture of the weed has an effect. As you can see here, we've searched for this, and sometimes we find it, and sometimes we don't. But this is all the data from the multi-state study. And I will say we've also looked for differences in soil moisture as having an impact. And believe it or not, thus far we have not really seen that to have much of an impact. I think we still have more to do there because I just have a hard time believing that. But so far, that's what the data shows. But here we see that the greater moisture in the weed, the greater weed control we're likely to get with weed electrocution. And the last point is really not anything related to corn and soybean, but we did a whole nother set of studies, and a whole nother graduate student had work in pastures. I think these implements have a natural fit in a pasture environment because anytime you have a height differential between the weed and the crop, in this case grass, you can use these. And so we have a lot of data. You can look on our website. I'm not going to go into it, but we have a lot of data on what we did there for 2 seasons and a lot of different species. But in a nutshell, this is a very simple way of summarizing that work, which is anywhere there's a green highlighted box that shows equal or higher control with electrocution compared to a herbicide treatment. And so you know you're not going to get probably control of perennials like horse nettle, but annual weeds, as long as you have that differential between grass and the weed, we can control those pretty well, and we're not killing our clovers. And so there's something to think about there, and may have a fit. Um, so all of that is basically just some highlights of what we've seen with electrocution. This is, I think it's still young in infancy stages and still more to do and more to learn. What we're trying to focus on now is taking that variability out. And that's only going to happen through learning what influences that variability in the first place. these are all the ways you can get in contact with me and in our social media and everything. And on our website, there are some slideshows about electrocution as well. So thank you for your time, and please feel free to contact me if you have any questions.